Welcome again to the Cento Leadership Table podcast with myself, Brett Ennals, CEO of Cento Search. This week, we're going to discuss problem solving and critical thinking at interview stage with the CEO of WeSuite, Tracy Larson. So today I'm with Tracy Larson of WeSuite, based out of just north of New York. And the WeSuite is a sales and estimating software platform. I'm right in saying that, aren't I? Got that bit right? Excellent.
Yes, you got that right.
And today's interview question, is around problem solving and critical thinking at interview stage and how leaders would test for those elements with a candidate. So if we start with how would you, in an interview, Tracy, how would you start to probe a candidate to find out if they are a critical thinker?
I think one thing that's important is that you're presenting maybe a challenge that you've faced in your business, or you request that from the candidate. But the things that I really would want to see, and in my business, that's an important skill set. And in many of the integrator businesses too, because a lot of what we're dealing out there are complex projects and situations to make sure that, if you're hiring a project manager, or in my case, someone who's thinking through a new software feature or any of those things, the number one thing, and this is something I coach our team on all the time, is to really get down to what the root of the problem or the challenge is. Yes. And so I'd want to know that this person is willing to ask why type questions repeatedly, because I think a lot of complex challenges are like an onion, and Absolutely. To really understand them, you've got to peel back layers. And every time you hear an answer, you most likely need to challenge that further to really get to the heart of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, when asking those questions, I mean, would you use sort of competency style based questions? Give me an example of where you've solved this sort of problem, or critical thinking was the example. But I think it's sometimes difficult for a candidate to express those answers in the interview situation, especially if it's a pressure interview situation where maybe they've got 2 or 3 people interviewing them. So is there any methodologies that you would employ to give a candidate, the opportunity to express
those? That, it's important. There are a few things I like to do. I like to ask more questions. And first I ask them to give me an example of a time when something happened. If they're having trouble thinking of that, I might present an example. And then I also think it's important that they describe exactly what they would do. That could be, who gets involved, who's the primary owner. And so starting to ask them questions that, okay, now we've established what the root of the problem is. How would you go about resolving it? And making sure that they first, give an example of, who's in charge of it and what the responsibility of that person is. They may not be the one that resolves everything or figures out, how to get to resolution. But I think that from there, starting to ask those kinds of questions, what's the top priority? And making sure they're expressing to you how they prioritize things. I often hear people tell me that they're great at multitasking. And my experience is that it's a myth to be able to multitask. As soon as you're trying to do 3 things at once, nothing is getting done.
No, exactly. Yeah.
And so maybe if they're starting to answer in ways that you don't think really suit, the right direction, for instance, dig into that and ask them another question. Oftentimes, you too, as an interviewer, you have to ask many, many questions and peel that onion back too, because just of what you're saying, Brett, they may not come in fully thinking of that particular situation or even that question. And so you've got to help them to get there. So I think that asking additional questions, understanding, You could ask them, what tools do you use?
Yeah.
You know, how do you understand timeline? And then how do you line up the events and tasks that need to happen in order to meet that timeline? It could be get into budget questions, what
Yes.
kind of investment and what the value is, and understanding what that value is to the organization to really understand whether there's a go or no go. I think a lot of what you're trying to find out is not just how they think about solving problems, but how they make decisions. And they
Yeah.
know, should I go forward, or do I call it, or do I change direction? So I think those are important as well.
And again, sometimes that the ability to make a decision is the critical thinking as well. And
That's
would you
right.
look for someone to be, if they don't have all the answers, because nobody's got all the answers, would you look for someone to also to be then resourceful enough to go and find the answers?
Absolutely. And that's another part of this, I think, is to say, what would you do? What are some of the
Yeah.
things you would do in order to look for the best way to solve the problem? And what if that didn't work? Or what if you couldn't find that answer there? What else could you do? You're really trying to figure out how they think.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing too is I would look at the experience that they've got, and that they're telling you that they have, because digging into that is important as well. You know, we sometimes see candidates that have what we think is exactly the right experience for what we're looking
Yeah.
for. Then they may list some skill sets. And depending on the job, they could list skill sets that they know are probably important to you, but they may not have used certain tools before.
No.
So you have to really dig into what level of competency they're at with that. And again, that doesn't mean that they're not the right candidate. You're trying to identify places where you may have to invest in education or mentorship, um, or perhaps, something that could be limiting, but also could be an opportunity for them to learn and to stretch. And that's the other thing I look for. Are they willing? Are they curious? Are they people who do problem solve and don't
Yeah.
give up? How resilient is this person? What do they do in the event that something isn't going well? How
Yes.
do they change? How do they switch gears? How do they ask for help?
Absolutely.
That's
I mean,
another.
I was about to come on to that because,
Yeah,
of course,
yeah.
you don't want someone just to bury their head in the sand and hope the problem goes away.
Right. Because it doesn't, right? And
No.
often it gets bigger. And by the time it's really coming to you or to whoever needs to help with it, it's way overgrown. It could have been
Absolutely.
tackled differently. And so I think that, part of what you're looking for too are personality traits here. People who are able to admit, hey, I need help, or I'm not really sure I'm going down the right road. I like people when they are figuring that out to at least come
Yeah.
to me with options.
Yeah.
Here's some possible things we could do. Um, I think too, another thing that we sometimes see is if you're not face to face, you know, people could be looking for answers while they're talking to you. And it's obvious that everyone today is using ChatGPT or any kind of AI or Google
Yeah.
or whatever to look for help, and that's fine. But I think what you're really trying to establish is what they do with that and what they can
Yes.
do.
Because it is
So,
just a tool at the end of
yes.
the day,
Yeah,
nothing more. And that's why, and I think that certainly the younger generation coming through have got to be AI savvy. They've got to be able to employ that technology to be able to use that, because obviously that's where everything's going to end up. But it's the difference of relying upon it and using it.
that's
It's the
right.
same as if you're doing calculations on a calculator, you've got to look at it with some logic and say, is that actually in the right ballpark?
That's right. And we see it often. But one of the things I think here, at least, we try to line up a few of these kinds of challenges ahead of time. And that's always helpful because, as we said before, this person may not be able to think of something off the cuff. And the other thing I think is that when it's a challenge that's important to you, one that you've faced before, one that you're looking for the right candidate to resolve, presenting that kind of challenge from your perspective is helpful because you're
Yeah,
really asking them at that point, how would you be working that here? And so I
absolutely.
think that that's really the key. Come up with 3 or 4 scenarios that you can talk about.
Where do you think some leaders go wrong when trying to understand the capabilities of the candidate interview stage?
Sometimes there's they talk too much.
Yeah,
They're not letting that person really express, or they try to bail somebody out. It's okay to have the silence.
yeah,
I think too that sometimes it's important, I think, to really hear someone. The candidate may say something different, something that you didn't expect, and something that you aren't even aware that you're looking for. Or they may say something that you feel kind of turned off about. And I find that digging into that helps me to see if I'm not myself, if I have blinders on, or if I am not thinking of something to the full capacity that I should. So I
yeah,
think that, sometimes you have to um, ask, wow, that's interesting. Why do you say that? Or what's your experience with that? I haven't had that before.
no,
Tell me more about it.
yeah, exactly.
That kind of thing.
Excellent, excellent. Well, look, I really do appreciate your time today. Probably taken up enough of it. If you, if you wanted to give everyone just a little bit of an overview of WeSuite, what exactly you do, in case I've not done it justice, then by all means, give us a little pitch.
Sure thing. So we are from contact to contract. We handle the entire sales process for security integrators, alarm companies, fire companies, everything from creating leads and managing them to very detailed, excellent estimating, proposal and contract production and signing and booking and all your sales stats. That's what we do.
Excellent, excellent.
That
Really do
sounds
appreciate
great.
that. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.